My contractions were 7 minutes apart when I told my husband it was time to go to the hospital. It was 10:30 p.m. and we needed to travel to the University of Chicago, which was on the opposite side of the city. As I was bending to get into the car, I felt a strange surge of contractions. I ignored the brief moment of fear because I was only 7 minutes apart, and I twisted and turned to get myself into the passenger seat and safely strapped in. The heat from the day was still present, so my husband cranked the air conditioning and he aimed those dashboard vents toward my boiling body. He gave me a smile and a wink, and then we proceeded toward the ramp that would take us to the south side. I grabbed onto the armrest, squeezing in intervals while taking quick breaths. Then the absurd happened. My contractions started speeding at an unbelievable rate. At first I thought I was wrong, denying that it could be true, but my husband asking if everything was all right pushed reality back in my face. "Something's wrong," I said. Before his voice could respond the way his eyes already had, and while we were passing U.S. Cellular Field, I felt a pop, and then the hot gushing of liquid descend down my legs. Now, I had delivered my other 2 children naturally, so I was very aware that this baby had crowned, and there's no going back. We're not making it to the hospital. I know it sounds cliche, but for a brief moment, I saw my life flash before my eyes. It was the image of people I've loved through the years of my life, and it ended with the image of my children. It was their faces embedded in front of me that willed me to take action. We will not die in this car on this expressway. I yanked my maternity pants and underwear down as far as I could get them, and I started to push.
Oh my God!
My husband said, "Holy shit!" and started dialing 911 on his cell phone while he's driving 55 miles per hour on the Dan Ryan Expressway. I jammed my heels into the car's floorboard and pushed so hard that I popped out her head and a little piece of her shoulders. And it took me by surprise because her face was down toward the car mat. So I had to crank my body to the side, cup her chin in my hand so that her head would not tear forward. I took a huge breath, rammed my feet down, felt a rip in my skin, grabbed the tips of her shoulders, and yanked her out. It's not over yet, hang on. I looked up for the first time and saw that we were approaching 51st Street, and there's a police station after the ramp. But because of construction and closed exits, we ended up getting off at 55th and the Dan Ryan, pulling into the Shell gas station at 11 p.m. As our car came screeching to a halt, a prostitute walked up to the car. She looked in the window and sang, "They got a baby." My husband jumped out of the car, threw his phone at some random man pumping gas and said, "Tell them where we are. Tell them we had a baby." He ran around to my side, whipped open my door. Now, all around my car, I have 10 people who had gathered, and they're all staring at me. One man yells, "Turn on the heat," and my husband did. A homeless man started removing his soiled shirt, and my husband sees this, and he takes off his shirt and gives it to me so I can wipe all that white stuff that's caked on our daughter's body. She was completely tangled in the umbilical cord, and I had yet to see her face. So as I was bringing her down to look at her, her arms flopped, and she was completely blue. I started to panic. "We need the thing I said, that bulby thing that the nurses use to suction out the nose and the throat." But we didn't have that. And my husband and I met each other's eyes in complete terror. We were frozen in fear. But that's when the woman's voice sang out again. Suck her mouth, she said. My husband grabbed our daughter, put his mouth over her nose and mouth, and started to suck. Now I have 10 people around my car with their hands up to heaven saying, please, Lord, save this baby. Please, Lord, save this baby. Please, Lord. My husband took 2 more huge mouthfuls of embryonic fluid, spit them to the ground, and then our daughter started to cry. And that is when the crowd sang out, thank you, sweet Jesus, thank you. Thank you, Lord Jesus, amen. The crowd continued to shout thanks as my husband and I struggled with that thick and slimy umbilical cord, careful not to pull it out of me because we were still attached. All the adrenaline made me hyper, like I could run a marathon. But I also became painfully aware of how long it took the EMTs to get to us. And when they finally did arrive, I was wondering why they were walking so slowly to our car. But their words answered my question. Oh, we thought we were going to deliver a crack baby in the bathroom.
Oh my God.
Those words stung. Here these people who had just saved my daughter's life were being torn down by the same people they replaced a few moments earlier. I wanted to say something to defend their honor, but my fear over my daughter getting swift treatment made me bite my tongue. I finally got out of the car with my pants around my ankles, not caring who saw me. We got onto the stretcher and we were loaded into the ambulance. And that's where my daughter received oxygen and looked like she was having the time of her life. Her eyes were as big as saucers and she was looking around. And I remember thinking, she's thinking, this rocks. That's also where they cut the umbilical cord. When we arrived at the hospital, the doctors asked the EMTs how they knew the baby was mine. I could not believe after everything we had been through, anyone would question our legitimacy. But the EMTs recited the facts. They were attached at the scene. They were attached at the scene. Those words were said 10 times in a 15-minute time span before it was documented by a qualified professional and laid to rest. Throughout our hospital stay, I kept thinking about the woman whose voice guided us and saved our daughter's life. While I felt nothing but joy and gratitude, I regretted not saying goodbye. We left so abruptly, and my husband agreed. So when we got discharged from the hospital, we drove back to the Shell gas station, and she was there. She was standing by a gas pump, looking kind of far out into the air. My husband pulled the car up slowly and said, "Hey, do you remember us?" And she looked in the window and she goes, "Oh, the folks with the baby." We took pictures with her and baby Ava, and we thanked her. We told her she saved our daughter's life. We asked her how she knew what to do, and she said, "Oh, I got 4 babies and 10 grandbabies. I love watching them doctors and nurses. I love watching what they do." We said we thought she'd make a great doctor or nurse someday, and she kind of looked far off, the sadness etched in the lines of her face. After a few more minutes, we concluded our visit and went home. My husband and I thought often of our daughter's birth, especially in the beginning, lodged in our beds for only a few hours of rest. We considered how things could have gone terribly wrong. But instead, we celebrated how blessed we were to happen upon a gas station with a doctor, a healer, our midwife, Ida.